You have probably heard people blaming the housing crisis on everything, from millennials buying avocado toast to evil corporations buying all the homes. Some of those explanations are partially right, but for the wrong reasons. Others are completely missing the point. Today, we are breaking down what's actually causing the housing crisis, not the viral Twitter takes, not the politician's soundbite, the actual structural causes backed by data. I'm warning you now, it's more complicated than a single villain, but also more logical than you might think. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why housing is so expensive, who benefits from it staying that way, and why your parents could afford a house at 25 while you are struggling at 35. If you have been on social media lately, you have probably seen this take: Blackstone is buying all the houses and causing the housing crisis. Or maybe you have seen it blamed on BlackRock. This is where it gets confusing, because Blackstone and BlackRock are two completely different companies with similar names. BlackRock is the world's largest asset manager with about 11.5 trillion in index funds and ETFs. Think of them like a massive investment platform for regular people's retirement accounts. They are not particularly focused on buying residential real estate. Blackstone is the world's largest private equity firm with about 1.17 trillion in assets, and this is the company actually buying residential properties. They own over 300,000 rental units in the United States, making them America's largest landlord. So when people say Blackstone is buying all the houses, are they right? Here is where the math gets interesting. The United States has about 100 million single-family homes. Blackstone owns about 300,000 of them. That's 0.3%. Institutional investors overall owns about 3 to 4% of single-family rentals. So how can 3 and 4% of ownership cause nationwide affordability problems? The national average is misleading because Blackstone and other institutional investors don't buy randomly across the country. They concentrate in specific metro areas. In Metro Atlanta, just 3 companies owned 19,000 houses, an 11% market share. Blackstone alone owns 11,000 homes in Atlanta, plus thousands more in Dallas, Tampa, and Phoenix. In an apartment market like this, private equity firms own nearly 25% of all apartments. When you control 11 to 25% of housing in a specific city, that's potentially market moving. Tampa, where private equity owns nearly 25% of apartments, saw cost-burdened renters jump from 52 to 61% between 2019 and 2023, with rents surging 49%, the largest increase among the 25 largest metro areas. Here is the honest answer: at 0.3% nationally, Blackstone is not the cause of the housing crisis, but at 11 and 25% in specific metros, they are potentially a significant contributing factors. Research shows mixed evidence. In Atlanta, one study found investor purchase accounted for only 1.4 of the 6% drop in home ownership since the foreclosure crisis. So they contributed, but weren't the main driver. The pattern is this: Blackstone and similar investors are taking advantage of an existing housing shortage and probably making it worse in specific cities, but they didn't create the shortage to begin with, which brings us to what actually did. The zoning problem. Zoning is when local governments divide all land into zones and create rules about what you can build. You have got residential zones for housing, commercial zones for businesses, industrial zones for factories. Sounds reasonable, right? The problem is what happens with residential zones. In most American cities, 75 or more of residential land is zoned for single-family homes only. That means on that land, it is illegal to build anything except a standalone house for one family. You cannot build a duplex, a townhouse, or a small apartment building. One house, one family, period. Here is a concrete example. Imagine you own land in a desirable neighborhood near jobs and transit. You want to build 6 townhouses, which will house 6 families, but zoning says no. You can only build one single-family house for one family. So instead of 6 families living there, only one can. 5 families have to look elsewhere, competing for the limited housing that does exist. Multiply this across entire cities where 75% of residential land is locked into this restriction. High demand meets artificially restricted supply and prices skyrocket. And this is not just about single-family zoning. Codes also include minimum lot sizes, height limits, parking requirements, and setback requirements. Each rule individually might sound reasonable, but combined they make it extremely difficult and expensive to build housing, especially affordable one. Here's the crucial detail: zoning restrictions don't affect affect housing prices equally. Research shows that most of American homes are priced close to what it costs to build them, with land value representing only about 20% of the price. In these areas, zoning isn't the main problem, but in high-demand coastal cities like California, New York, and Boston, housing is priced significantly higher than construction costs, and zoning is the dominant factor. In California, 95% of the residential land is zoned single-family only. When you can combine high demand with extreme supply restrictions, you get San Francisco and Los Angeles level prices. You might be wondering why cities will do this to themselves, why create rules that make housing scarce and expensive. The answer isn't about city planners making mistakes, it's about who controls zoning decisions, which will essentially get us to the next problem, the homeowner behavior problem. If you already own a home, you benefit when housing becomes more expensive. Your house is probably your largest asset, maybe your retirement plan. If housing becomes more affordable through increased supply, your home's value goes down. That's just how supply and demand work. So when a developer wants to build a new apartment complex in your neighborhood, you have a financial incentive to oppose it. When the city council proposes allowing duplexes or townhouses on your street, you have an incentive to show up and vote against it. They are not being evil, they are just protecting their very small wealth. These people are essentially saying, not in my backyard. People often support building more housing in theory, but oppose every specific project near them. There are always seemingly legitimate reasons, like increased traffic, train schools, change the neighborhood character, block sunlight, bring those people, But when you oppose every project for local reasons, the cumulative effect is that nothing gets built anywhere. Here is the critical part. Homeowners have disproportionate political power. They are more likely to vote, especially in local elections where zoning gets decided. They are older on average with more time to spare. They are organized through neighborhood associations, and most importantly, they are the majority of voters. Renters, young people trying to buy their first home, and people who would move to the city if housing were affordable. These people either can't vote in that jurisdiction yet or don't vote as consistently. So local politicians listen to the homeowners who show up and vote, not to the abstract future residents who don't exist yet. What this creates is essentially a wealth transfer from young people and renters to existing homeowners. Every time a new development gets blocked, existing homes become more valuable. Homeowners' wealth increases while renters pay more. Young people can't afford to buy, and wealth inequality grows. And many of these homeowners aren't rich. They are middle-class people whose main asset is their home. They worked hard to buy that house, and now they are being rational actors protecting their investment. The system just happened to reward them from making housing scarce. Even when those first-time buyers want to build a house, actually constructing new housing has gotten harder and more expensive. There are three interconnected problems: construction costs, labor shortages, and builder behavior. Building materials genuinely cost more. During the pandemic, higher lumber costs alone added around $35,000 to the price of an average new home and $119 to monthly renters. Recent tariffs on construction materials are projected to add roughly $135 billion to residential construction costs over the next 5 years. These aren't regulatory costs, these are real resources that cost real money. Then there is the labor problem. The construction industry never fully recovered after the 2008 housing crash. Many workers left the industry, fewer young people entered trades, and the workforce aged. You can't just snap your fingers and create a million new trainees. Making this worse, immigrants make up more than a quarter of the construction workforce. When immigration policies become more restrictive, construction capacity takes a direct hit. Fewer workers mean slower constructions, mean less housing supply. Finally, there is what builders choose to build. Even when they can build and have the workers, developers strongly prefer building expensive homes over affordable ones. Better profit margins. If you are deciding between luxury condos or middle-income apartments, the luxury condos are more profitable per unit. You are dealing with similar regulatory hurdles and construction challenges, but you make more money on the high-end product, so that's what gets built. This is why even when new housing gets constructed, it's offering $3,000 per month apartments or $800,000 condos, not starter homes for young families. The market rewards building for top of the income distribution, not the middle or the bottom. These three problems reinforce each other. High construction costs mean only expensive housing is profitable. Labor shortages mean even that expensive housing gets built slowly. Builder preference for luxury products mean the limited housing that does get built doesn't help people who need affordable options. And all of this is happening on top of the regulatory barriers we already discussed. The results is what economics call an underbuilding gap. The United States has been building fewer homes than needed for years. Estimates vary, but but most suggest they are short somewhere between 3 to 7 million housing units nationwide. The United States haven't built enough to keep up with the population growth, household formation, and a replacement of aging housing stock. So let's recap. First, Blackstone and institutional investors own a small percentage nationally, but are concentrated enough in specific metros to be a contributing factor, probably amplifying an existing problem rather than creating it from scratch. Second, zoning regulations artificially restrict supply by locking 75% of residential land into single-family only development, and this is the dominant factor in high-demand coastal city. Third, existing homeowners have both the financial incentive and the political power to keep housing scarce because scarcity makes their home more valuable. And fourth, even when housing is allowed to be built, high construction costs, labor shortages, and builder preference for luxury products create supply-side constraints that slow down housing production. These causes aren't separate, they reinforce each other. Zoning creates scarcity, scarcity raises prices, high prices benefit homeowners, homeowners lobby to maintain zoning restrictions, high construction costs mean only expensive housing is profitable, which doesn't help affordability, which makes homeowners even more protective of their property values. You now understand what's broken. You understand why housing is expensive, who benefits from it staying expensive, and why the problem persists. You understand that there is no single villain here. It's a system with bad incentives at multiple levels. But understanding what's broken is only half the picture, because you are probably wondering, if we know what the problems are, why haven't they been fixed? Why do we still have restrictive zoning when we know it causes housing shortages? Why hasn't the government stepped in? Why don't voters just elect politicians who will fix this? That's what we are covering in the next video, because the reasons these problems don't get fixed are just as important as understanding the problems themselves, and understanding those reasons will show you exactly how power actually works in the American political system. See you there.